Thin Grace is a short film. It's about a young teenager who is groomed by her boyfriend into prostitution, and how she is saved by her best friend out of that life, and how she meets up with him much later when she's a couple of decades later, and they meet by accident in a park.
So where did the idea for the film come from?
I had written a play in Vienna called Faces, which had been, a friend of mine asked me if I would write on the same theme. That was in Vienna in 2007, and when we came back to England in 2008, having lived in Vienna, I felt like I would like to put on the play again in England. So in 2014, I managed to get the funding and everything together to put it on as a play. I'd worked on it a bit. Because it was originally in German, so I reworked it, and we had quite a lot of young people involved, of course, and some schools involved and things like that. So when I had quite a lot of feedback from parents who said that they wished more young people would get to see this, because it kind of made people aware of what goes on in very kind of civilised Middle England homes, not just, the down and out places in ghettos and things like that you hear about. And so I thought, well, probably the best way would be to make it into a film, because obviously you have a wider reach. So that's how it all started to develop, and then we started working on that in 2015.
Because the main character, Grace, she's obviously in a difficult situation at home, but she's not they're not a family that's living in extreme poverty. Like you say, it's, it could be anyone.
Yes, that was a definite choice, because I did the research, quite a lot of research, and I wanted to show that it could be anybody's daughter. There is a lot of belief that, if you come from a middle class or, relatively well-off family in, Buckinghamshire or somewhere like that, this doesn't happen. But we know from the Bullfinch case that started in the north, I can't remember where, but it actually, the reach was right down into leafy Buckinghamshire, for example. So that's why I deliberately chose a white, sort of relatively well-off family, but quite dysfunctional family, quite normal really, nothing too horrendous. But that's why I chose that sort of theme, to show that it can affect anybody.
Mm. And are there any, you mentioned the Bullfinch case, what real world situations informed the idea for the film?
Well, the real world situations were things I'd researched for doing the play, back in reading stories, true life stories from Germany actually, because obviously we were down in Austria. But then when we got to Oxford, where we shot the film, I met a lady who had come from that life, and she'd run a high-end brothel in Oxford, and she knew everything there was to know about not just the sort of more sophisticated side of things, but also she'd had connections with trafficked people and she had a lot of very, very informative insight to give that sort of counteracts a lot of the glamour that is put out on sort of TV and on films. She gave the hard truths. So she was able to not only support what I was doing, but she was also doing a bit of coaching of some of the actors, actually, because she was able to talk from a experience, you know.
How important was that experience, that advice?
Oh, I mean, that was amazing. I mean, she's a lovely, lovely person, and she's come out of that life, you know, completely, and works with people, you know, who are traumatised. She has serious trauma herself from her life, and she was able to talk to some of our, particularly the boys, the men in the cast, who are just lovely men who are actors, you know, who had no idea of those kinds of the seedy underworld kind of thing and that kind of abuse that's going on. And I remember one of them saying just what an eye-opener it was for him. So yes, it was very, very helpful to have her around. Yeah.
And the film also touches on issues around trafficking. So the main character is based locally to where the story takes place, but the film does touch on trafficking from overseas as well, human trafficking.
Yes, that was a development from the original play where there wasn't that theme. I felt I needed to broaden it to encompass the trafficking issue, which turned out to be very timely because they had just done the Bullfinch investigation just before I did the play. So the timing worked very well. So again, I had to do a bit of research and find out what, you know, how things work in that area. Again, my friend was able to give a lot because she could spot the trafficked girls straight away. She said she can tell straight away. And, you know, again, I got a lot of research done for that. But I wanted to show the two different aspects, but how it has the same outcome. And in fact, in the film, it's a worse outcome for the trafficked girl. But and we didn't specify what nationality, partly because of casting, actually. So we cast somebody we felt was great for the part, and it turns out that she's Hispanic. So we went with the Spanish because it is across the world, so it didn't really matter. It was going to be relevant wherever she came from. So
it's a film dealing with universal themes that are still prevalent now.
Yeah. Yes, it hasn't become outdated. I mean, it was set in the 80s because she's looking back over her life. You know, we see the older Grace who's, you know, in her 40s or whatever, and she's looking back to her youth and how this all happened. So it's actually set in the 80s, but the film and the message and all that hasn't changed at all, really. And it's kind of surprised me, actually, because, you know, you do tend to think something's going to get a bit outdated, but we finished it in 2017, and you hear stories, you hear things just recently, you know, and you think, oh gosh, you know, it's still very relevant.
So one of the unique things about the film is that there are two, I think it's two, is it two or three, the PT bits?
Physical theatre, yeah, there's three scenes. Okay. Well, actually four, because there's a whole combat scene which is crossover with physical theatre, yeah.
So there are a number of scenes like that are based around the use of physical theatre in film. Now, I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere else.
No.
So is that unique? Is that something unique that you did?
Because in the play we used physical theatre to show the really bad scenes. There's a gang rape scene and there's a seduction scene that turns nasty. So for the play, both plays, Danny I knew that he'd be able to choreograph it in such a way that it would make a very, very visceral impact without having to have any nudity or any actual sexual acts, or it's very difficult to get the fine line between the voyeuristic glamour side of it and the very dark, very distressing, too graphic depiction of something. And what an audience often will do, unless they're twisted, if they watch something that's too realistic and too graphic, they will emotionally switch down because they can't handle it, and then they'll distance themselves from it, and then they'll go, oh well, that doesn't happen here, or they won't be able to take ownership of it. If on the other side, like so many films out there, which really I find upsetting, it's glamorized, voyeuristic, titillating, it's just not going to achieve its end. I was really pleased that the people who gave feedback on the plays, who'd been in that life, said it had the right balance. And that was real relief for me, because it was difficult to know how to get there. Danny had done all that choreography, and I was really confident that he would be able to do that for the film. So my director, Murdo, he was very open. When I'd written the script and I said to him, I want these to be physical theatre, he was actually very trusting, because he'd never done it before, and the DOP had never done anything like this before, and they were all, oh, this is interesting. They were great, because they were very trusting that we were going to be able to pull it off. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I've had one person said they didn't like the one of the scenes, the suicide scene, that the the trafficked girl goes through. But it's a personal preference, so you can't please all the people all the time. But I felt it was going to, I don't know, perhaps it took it slightly into art film rather than straight up reality film. But I was happy with how it came out. So,
and looking back on the shoot now and the whole process, what jumps out at you now as being particularly memorable?
Well, it was a massive learning curve for me. I had done a little bit of theatre directing. I'd written, a few plays, some of which I've been able to produce, and I had no idea what was involved in film. And had I not bumped into Murdo, who is a filmmaker, who said, would you like some help? It wouldn't be anything like it is. I know it's not perfect now, but for a first I was pleased with it. But it was a huge learning curve. I had absolutely no idea. I didn't even know what the crew that I needed is so different from theatre. I didn't know what their roles were. So it was like a year of being thrown in with Murdo, who sort of trained me up on the job, if you like. I realised that he just needed to be left to do the directing. I still coached the actors because I had very specific, beliefs and skills in that area. But so there isn't one particular, there's loads of highlights, but I mean, I think just realising the difference between film and theatre, and that you can spend, you have got a 3-minute scene that took 8 hours to shoot, and things like that was staggering. So even that was great, because he advised me. He said, you will need this amount of hours for this scene. And I'm like, oh my goodness, kind of thing. So that was great, because I just took all his advice on that. And that's why it worked, because we had a great crew. I mean, they were and they really believed in the theme, so they really invested. very little pay, bless them. So yeah, they really invested in it. So it was a great experience, and I think one highlight actually would be that we all got relationally, we all got on really well. I mean, I had a couple of run-ins with the director, you know, on the acting side of things, but we all got on really well, and there was a really great atmosphere. We had some young people involved in like a nightclub scene from a local college, and they loved the experience, and it was just a great atmosphere the whole, you know, the 2 weeks of shooting. It was really good.